Hey everyone, welcome back to Real Talk NFT, where we talk all things Web3. Excited today to have the CEO of TrustCheck, Ric Pellegrini. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me here. Excited to be on.
Yes, and I'm actually excited to talk to you about security. A lot of listeners don't know this because I don't talk about it much, but I actually spent over 10 years in somewhat in the security space in the domain name industry, working with Fortune 500 companies, trying to protect the digital assets, which is funny. They actually used the term digital assets long ago, and you'll be surprised how many don't take it seriously. So I like talking security. I did it for over a decade. And in the Web3 NFT space, you guys, not you guys, it's been in the headlines, security. And we'll get into that. But before we get started, give us a little bit about your background and how you got into the space.
Yeah, sure. So, my background, so prior to founding this company, I previously worked at AWS Data Exchange, which is basically an AWS service that facilitates the exchange of third-party data in the cloud. And then prior to that, I met my two co-founders, worked at a company called RapidSOS. And RapidSOS, amazing company. Basically what it did was, and what it still does, is it takes data from Apple and Google when you call 911. It takes that location data and transmits it to 911 centers across the country so that emergency responders can find you faster. So again, you can understand a little bit about the DNA of like the founding team. So it's myself, the VP of engineering and former co-founder and CTO of RapidSOS. Very much, that sort of trust and safety, protecting people. Was sort of one thing I think we really wanted to continue to focus on. And that was a little bit, so we sort of went our separate ways. I went to AWS for a little bit and then we came back together to really like get on this mission to make Web3 safe for all. So that's really a bit about the origin story of the company. And then, we're also big into data. A lot of helping to secure Web3 is going to be about data, predictive data, et cetera. So we felt like it was a big opportunity, a real customer problem that so many folks had in the space, and just, felt like something that we could work on for, hopefully decades of our career. So that was a little bit about the origin story of us.
Yes, yeah. How did you get inspired? How was your Web3 and NFT experience? Do you have any that you love and enjoy yourself?
Yeah, well, look, it's interesting actually. So I've been talking about NFTs for a long time with my wife, who is actually in the art space. Is, so we've had, many debates, at the dining room table about what are NFTs, how significant are they, et cetera. And I think that sort of piqued our interest pretty early. I would say like I'm pretty conservative, so I wouldn't call myself like a heavy NFT trader by any stretch of the imagination. But I think we really got interested in things like NFT provenance, NFT transactions, how the current ecosystem works, and really how you do this in a decentralized way. So as a founding team, we got just super interested in the technical problems behind that, how folks were getting scammed, what was occurring, and really felt like there was a lot that we could solve. That was kind of the, again, the impetus for going after this big project. So,
yeah. And the project itself, TrustCheck, I actually downloaded it, installed it myself. And I was really surprised how user-friendly it was. I was prepared to, take out my ID and type in all my information, emails and whatnot. I found it so simple to use. I downloaded it and it started checking, I did some mock transactions. And it worked fairly easily. That was one of your core goals, I'm sure, just to make the onboarding process super easy for like Web2 folks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, our company, the mission that we say is make Web3 safe for all, right? So, and by all, we don't just mean experts, right? And so right now, even if you're an expert, it's still hard to avoid getting scammed, but we want to make products and we want to, and again, through both our B2C products and our B2B products, we want to make sure that as many users as possible have access to this tech that basically can protect them from scams, because a lot of these scams are just really highly preventable, and do that in a way that is just, so easy to use that you don't need to know anything about crypto. You just have something that is, working on your behalf while you're entering into these transactions to say, okay, does this look okay? Does this not look okay? And issuing you a very easy to understand warning whenever we detect that something's off.
Yeah, a lot of users don't realize the implications of being your own bank, right? Having your own assets. And I'm sure there's a lot of vector points where people can get scammed. Can you tell us, we can probably talk for days, but how big is this problem? Is it happening, to a majority of users on a daily, for companies itself, platforms itself? Could give us some sort of, summary of what's going on out there.
Yeah. So what's really interesting is, and this is, when we first started looking at the space, something that really intrigued us. So you have a lot of energy that's been focused to date on things like smart contract security audits, preventing hacks, and these kind of like, large level exploits for hundreds of millions of dollars. Those get a lot of headlines. But a real gap is what we like to call end user security, which is basically people, it's a combination of user interface, user experience, and customers basically doing things that they don't intend to be doing. And so we've interviewed at this point around 250 scam victims. And actually we went through and said, okay, how did you get scammed? How did this occur? And really, these are what I would term sort of micro scams, right? These are not going to get reported in some, massive report, et cetera. And what was, and so we think that, again, it's hard to say in terms of the aggregate population, how many folks have been scammed, but these micro scams where folks are losing $30 NFTs, $1,000 NFTs, not amounts that make headlines, but affect so many users, we think is like, again, the biggest barrier to end user crypto adoption long term. So yeah, and I'm happy to walk through also some of the mechanics and some of the things we check for if you'd like me to go a little deeper there as well.
Yeah, definitely. To your point, it just brought a lot of memories back. Personally, thankfully, knock on wood, I haven't been scammed yet. I have been rug pulled, which I saw on your website was a definition of a scam, which you can't really track, right? I guess you could track the project before you mint it, but mine was rug pulled after like 3 weeks, so there was no way I could have known. But to your point, I had friends message me saying, Joe, I got scammed for $1,000. Like it wasn't monumental, like $10,000, but it was like $1,300. So to your point, a lot of these don't get raised and it happens on the daily. So yeah, talk us through, how, you are even trying to help the average person through this, through, the extension, which I briefly mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. So the extension does a few different things. So the first thing about a transaction when you are purchasing an NFT or really just interacting with anything on chain, right, is actually looking at the transaction message and seeing what that transaction message is going to do. So that's sort of the first part of any like user protection is running a transaction simulation. And that transaction simulation occurs on a forked version of the blockchain. So basically, it's not, nothing's actually occurring, but the proper sort of balance changes and where assets are being transferred, and very critically, which approvals and permissions are being granted are all displayed to the user. And then you have a warning if there's something potentially unsafe. So those three things are sort of your baseline, is running that transaction simulation. Because a lot of the way folks actually end up getting scammed is, for example, they'll sign a request that transfers set approved for all permission. And that's one permission. There are a bunch of other ones as well that folks can mistakenly transfer. And that effectively transfers the permissions to manage the assets that are in your wallet on a given smart contract to a counterparty wallet, right? So if you sent me a dangerous transaction request and I signed it, you could just take all of the NFTs immediately that were on a given smart contract and then transfer them out to the wallet of your choosing, or basically do whatever you wanted with them. Other scams allow you to work through a specific smart contract to, for example, take an NFT, list it for $0 on a marketplace, and then and then automatically purchase that NFT back for $0, effectively giving it to the scammer for free. So those transaction mechanics is really part one of what you need to worry about. Now, the second thing is looking at all the entities that you're interacting with, right? Because some scams, I'll give you a really interesting example. What we noticed is that some scammers, what they ended up doing was, instead of doing site approved for all transfers or things that, are known dangerous, what they would do is actually make the mechanics super simple. So it would just be, you go to an NFT site or a mint site, you click a button, and all that button does, it just transfers out a couple ETH from you to another wallet. Now that, in the context, it's hard to detect that as being a scam in the sense that just a wallet transfer is a perfectly legitimate transaction. But if you know that it's in the context of an NFT mint site, for example, that shouldn't be the case. Like, you should be paying you should have a certain price and you should be getting something back in return. So analyzing that context is where sort of, I think we try to take it to the next level, and what helps really prevent a lot of scams. And that's looking at the website that you're on, looking at the wallets you're interacting with, and looking at the smart contracts you're interacting with, all through that transaction message. So that's sort of what our That's what our extension does, and also very critically what our APIs enable businesses to do on behalf of crypto businesses to do on behalf of their users. So in effect, once you've looked through all of those and said, hey, is this a scam wallet? Is this a scam, or is this a malicious or vulnerable smart contract? Does this website have any scam code on it? You get a really comprehensive understanding of everything that you're interacting with, and hopefully more confidence in your transaction in the event you want to go through with it.
Yeah, to your point, uneducated users is probably one of the main aspects of being scammed. Like you shouldn't be transferring a different amount of Ethereum if you're minting an NFT, and knowing not to approve that transaction. However, even myself, I don't consider myself a sophisticated NFT collector, although I've collected hundreds, if not even thousands, of NFTs to this day. But I still cannot read a smart contract or know which stem from malicious sites or bad actors like you can. So it's definitely helpful to have a level of security beyond just the eye test that I've been through, through my years here in the NFT landscape. And the question is, why hasn't, platforms, took the lead here? They have these transactions due to their smart contracts. And why don't they warn us? Like the company like a MetaMask, for example, why haven't they implemented that?
Yeah, I mean, so this is, this is where we think things are really headed, right? So when we think about our product offering, the B2C extension is part one, but long term, like similar to antivirus in Web 2, where people don't generally purchase antivirus software anymore, right? You think that it's included in your Chrome browser, you expect it to be included in your operating system. So long term, we expect these capabilities to be in all the big wallets, all of the big NFT marketplaces, all of the platforms, that really are facilitating end user transactions. In terms of why haven't they taken the lead, I think you see varying degrees of sophistication depending on which platform you're looking at. I would say that one thing that a trend that we've seen recently is, of course, like with the recent obviously price fluctuations in the crypto market, and really since things came down a bit from their all-time highs, like folks are really focused on they don't have the same resources that they did previously, right? And they don't have the resources to think steps ahead and dedicate a security team, because our whole team, we spend our days living and breathing these threats and really figuring out how to address them. And it's taken us a lot of time and effort to really get up to speed and make sure that we can stay one step ahead. So I do think there is a need for those solutions to help these organizations more easily implement those. And then also too, I do think you're starting to see certain organizations upping the bar with respect to the security checks that they have. But again, it's an ongoing battle, right? Because what'll happen is the level will increase of anti-scam, and then the scammers will take the next step, and then we'll have to take that next step to keep combating them. And so again, it's this constant, almost arms race to develop the most sophisticated tech.
Yeah, definitely this landscape is going to evolve, and there's going to be more interesting scams coming out with more, hopefully security layers to help us with that. Is there any set kind of points of threat that we should be aware of besides, the ones that you just mentioned, like signing the smart contract incorrectly because the UI is not, showing it in an easy way? Like we know the biggest threats are out there right now. And in the domain name space world, one of the biggest inefficiencies is just, user approving the wrong contracts, right? Like you could put all security protocols in place, but if an employee is not trained correctly, they don't have 2FA. And we've seen this, with even the Bored Ape Twitter, where they, sent out a scam and people thought that, hey, this is an authentic, announcement from, and pick any project. It could be Bored Ape, it could be, CryptoPunks, whatnot. So those are kind of the instances where even if you have the best security, it's going to get bypassed, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, so what's interesting, so like one of the APIs, and this is an API that we really focus on, is the website checker, right? So for us, you can basically, any company can send us an API, can send us a website, and then we basically run it through our API and send it back to them, in hundreds of milliseconds, and basically say, okay, is there drainer code on this site? Is this a scam site? Is this been reported as a scam site, et cetera, and run through all of those checks. And that's one that really applies everywhere, right? It applies to social media platforms. It applies to Discord. It applies anywhere that someone can post a link and have a scam. Because what you'll see very frequently, especially in NFTs, is you'll have folks that will wash trade a given collection, right? And in order to increase the popularity. And then once it gets into a top list, then they'll swap out the URL and then for a scam URL, and then get a bunch of folks to go to that scam URL to try and mint an NFT or claim an NFT. So URLs are a major, and websites in particular are a major threat vector, and that's something that we look at all the time. So I think a piece of advice, number one, if you are trading NFTs, if you are interacting with mint sites, etc., is be very, very certain that you're on the right website, because that's the first scam vector. If you can be sure that you're on a legitimate NFT marketplace or you're on the legitimate mint site, that's going to go a long way towards protecting you. That would be thing one. And then thing two is just, in general, scammers really prey on FOMO. They really, really try and put time pressure on folks and say, all right, I need you to do this very quickly or else you're going to miss the opportunity to mint. That is always a red flag. And look, unfortunately, sometimes FOMO is a very effective marketing strategy too for legitimate sites. But really, that, in terms of two very kind of like obvious things to think through: one, make sure you're on the right website. And two, whenever someone's really pressuring you to do something or trying to emphasize FOMO, always think twice about it.
Well, that's tough because that's a driving factor in marketing.
I know.
And,
no, exactly. It is really tough. I mean, some other practical tips, by the way, definitely, whether it's TrustCheck or another, wallet protection extension, those things, those are of course very helpful in thinking about it. In terms of flagging potential issues that you may have. And then also too, one thing I like to do in particular is check, like, do the links work in all directions? So what I mean by do the links work in all directions is, does the website link to the social media profile that links to some other third-party source that then links back to it, and just trying to establish as much of a chain as you possibly can to make sure that it's not, one letter off, or has the website has a dash in it when it really shouldn't, for example. Those are all things that are very frequently used. And actually, again, one of the things we look for is we call them actually twisted URLs, where basically if they have slight derivations of the most popular NFT projects, we will also flag those.
Yeah, that's definitely good advice. Not to FOMO, double check links. Coming from the domain space, I know that a domain, even a real one, could be hijacked. We've seen this with Google, with the Syrian army. We've seen this with sites. So what I do is I tend to miss opportunity more now than before. And it's fine right now. The time's, not as exciting as it was back in 2021 bubble. And I will wait for many people to mint an NFT or to purchase an NFT on the site before I go and do it. Now, if I don't get one, it's okay. I'll wait. But I just know that domain names could be hijacked very easily, even authentic ones. So it's a scary world out there.
Absolutely.
Is there any oversight here? I know in the space of domains where I came with, there's a lot of security acts like GDPR. There's a California protection rights for data. Is there anything that's going to be put in place with all I guess the entities like dApps don't own the information for consumers, so it'll be hard for them to regulate. But is there any oversight coming for this at all?
Yeah, I mean, so not to my knowledge, but our stance on this. I mean, obviously, we believe in the power of decentralization, having a decentralized world. But I do think too much of regulatory scrutiny to date has not been focused on protecting end customers. And if you think about what a lot of consumer protection legislation is for many, many products out there, right? Software, hardware, physical goods, whatever it may be, it's really about protecting those customers from scams. And right now, you have so many people that end up getting scammed, and these aren't things that fall into the gray area. These are we can prevent scams if everyone offered transaction simulation. We can prevent scams if everyone were actually, pooling data and resources and making sure that, we were keeping folks away from bad URLs, bad links, et cetera. So there are, I do think actually a lot of very interesting things that legislators could potentially do to protect customers in this country. We haven't heard much of it right now. Much of the focus obviously has been, in a post FTX world about sort of different issues. But I would really again, we really feel strongly that unless these protections get put in place, it's going to be very hard for mainstream users to adopt crypto, just because it's too dangerous. You don't expect, I mean, the equivalent right now, and the example I like to use is imagine if you called up, pick your top stockbroker, company, whatever, Fidelity, others, et cetera. And you said, hey, I would like to buy a stock. And then they told you actually, well, actually, the stock you attempted to buy wasn't real. And by the way, all of the assets in your bank account are now drained because of the
Oh
fact
my
that you
gosh.
attempted to buy that stock, right? Like that's the state of the world right now for crypto and users that are self-custodying. So as we see more of a trend towards, I think we're going to see a trend towards more self-custody, of course, in the wake of the failure of some of the more centralized players in the space. Like these protections are going to be really critical to having a healthy and functioning and vibrant crypto and NFT market more generally. So.
Yeah, I had a thought where I wanted to trust these entities, and I did for a large part, and this could happen with, to your point, with stock traders actually, like Bernie Madoff or even corporations, right?
Exactly.
So hopefully the second wave of these exchanges are trusted and learned, and we can have some oversight with them that will protect us, maybe like an FDIC of sorts at minimum. But yeah, that's something that I'm scared of. And before NFTs and the whole crypto world, I never had to pay much thought to this. And just a general question here, I see a lot more NFTs in the headlines than crypto wallets. I know you mentioned protocol is getting infiltrated, but how come we're not seeing headlines of individuals having their crypto wallets drained? Is it just not as prevalent over there?
Well, I think it is just as prevalent. I do think like NFTs, I would say have taken up such I guess what mind share in general, in the general population, just because they're things that are, I would say, and by the way, for great reason, because NFTs are really cool. Like, they've
Sure.
taken up a lot of a lot more headspace there. So when you see something like, Kevin Rose losing his couple $1 million of NFT, I mean, everybody, everyone was freaking out about that. Oh my gosh, Kevin Rose, I can't believe that, this guy lost his NFTs. But those types of things are probably are happening very frequently in the crypto space generally. It's just that if it's nondescript money versus, hey, here are these assets that I lost, right? I mean, how many, for example, art heist movies have we seen that just are, that are fantastic, that folks love? So I would say NFTs, that's sort of part one. And then part two is that you do have a lot of interaction with NFTs that are occurring on websites that are separate, right? Whereas like a lot of crypto trading does occur in sort of these kind of like walled garden type of environments where some of the same things that can happen, like your wallet getting completely drained, you have less of an issue there. But with NFTs in particular, like if you're going around to different mint sites, that's a huge threat factor. And so I think that's why you're seeing a lot of NFT scams in particular. But again, the biggest, if you look at, crypto theft, et cetera, like by far the biggest stuff is not going on. I'm forgetting the exact numbers, but many billions have been stolen or laundered in crypto. NFTs, I don't think the number's anywhere close to that. So it's, proportionally, NFTs have much more mind share, despite in aggregate probably having slightly less in terms of, a lot less in terms of aggregate volumes of funds stolen.
Yeah, definitely. There's way more volume in the crypto world. I'm just surprised. To your point, there's way more touch points for NFTs and more vectors where bad actors can come in, for sure. And I, for one, had to learn, thankfully not the hard way, but coming from domain name security, I learned to kind of protect my assets a little bit better. We kind of segment it in the domain world. There's SSL certificates and DNS, and there's DDoS attacks, and then there's domain names itself, and then there's the employees, which is the biggest risk, right? So I always see myself as the biggest risk, and I have 7 hard. Well, it's like hard to fathom how many bank accounts I have, holding my assets, like 4 or 5 of them. And it's tough to keep track of everything. It's so hard. I can't see common day people coming in here and doing this. I don't know, putting a more, of their hard-earned money into what we're doing now, because it's just so hard to use.
Yeah, and also too, I mean, that's what's also interesting, right? So like hardware wallets protect you against losing your keys, right? Which is one, issue that folks have, or giving up your keys. But these other scams are at transaction time, right? So even if you have a hardware wallet, you can still just as easily get scammed as anyone else with a software wallet. So it's just a really interesting, I mean, obviously hardware wallets are great and more secure generally than software wallets for other reasons, but still, anytime you're entering into one of these transactions, it is potentially dangerous. So it's one of these things where I would say, and by the way, we've had folks like, I was talking with someone who said they have, a particular sort of DeFi trader, NFT trader, et cetera, who just has like a massive spreadsheet of all their wallet addresses and trying to, segment hot wallets, cold wallets, et cetera. I do think, by the way, like for folks that are trading more heavily, segmenting your wallets, making sure that you have hot wallets and cold wallets, because obviously at the end of the day, if you're trading with a wallet that doesn't have that much in it in terms of value, there's a lot less risk that you're going to lose a lot of value. So that's just like one other broad point. If you're considering trading these things heavily, definitely, have a good strategy in terms of how you're going to do that. But yeah, it is very hard for, again, the end user, even for experts, to manage these things. So, and that's actually interesting from a product perspective. We've been thinking about that too. Just like, how can you make it easier, not just for the one wallet management, but for the multi-wallet management of all these security?
Yeah, it definitely. There's articles out there, threads out there. I wrote one. Actually, you at minimum need 3 wallets. Just a minting one, short term, a midterm, weekly or monthly one, where if you utilize that, more frequently, then a cold storage one, ones that you would never touch. And it surprises me that someone like a Kevin Rose, I guess he's just too rich, right? He has like 60, 100,000, basically he has houses in there, and he doesn't care to, spread out the risk there. He's just like, it's fine. Just put it all on one hard wallet.
They're spreading out the risk. And then there's also like, he has a team of security experts, right, that can help him with this stuff. And he still fell victim. So again, it's just, it's just, I really we really do believe, we kind of bet the company on this thesis, right? That like end user security, this topic of end user security, is the biggest barrier to long-term crypto adoption. Like a lot of the headlines aren't with it right now. They're with, FTX and these more centralized entities, but self-custody and end user security is going to be to us what makes or breaks crypto, both in this country and I think globally. Because also too, a lot of the scam victims that we spoke to, it wasn't just folks in the United States, it was international. So some of these folks were losing, a couple $1,000s, but their income was, between $10 and $20,000 a year. So like, these are like significant financial investments and losses, that, again, that the space needs to correct. And, I remain very hopeful we can all come together and get it done for our end customers.
Yeah, well, thank you for putting a progressive step forward. What's the next iteration of a TrustCheck? I know that you're working strictly right now with Ethereum. What's next?
Well, so we work on Ethereum and EVM compatible chains as well. So we're so I think next for us, I think we have a lot of very interesting product ideas around how we can. So one of the main things with blockchain that's tricky, obviously, is that there are no takebacks, right? So something happens on chain, it occurs. There's no centralized entity that can say, "Oh, you know what? We messed up that trade for you. We messed up that transaction for you. We'll make it right." So really, I won't preview too much, but we are looking at ways to, effectively insulate users from risk, in a more in a way that can effectively, mitigate some of their losses when they are, in fact, entering into these bad transactions. So we'll see. That, and of course, more machine learning work on, in particular, our smart contract detection, website detection, and other API models.
Yeah, that's definitely very, very helpful to have at least the website detection in my mind, because I came from domain space. There's so many hieroglyphs that they use a Latin script and it looks exactly like the site. And I'm surprised there's not a browser not crypto based that just detects fraudulent phishing sites. That should be out there. I'm sure there is one out there. I just don't have. Maybe I should download it.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, they definitely are. Like, if you look in Chrome, like it will help you from certain phishing sites. But the thing with a lot of these NFT scams in particular is they're very quick, right? So like what they'll do is they'll last for a week, they'll last for a day. So it's not, it doesn't necessarily register to them. And then by the time, X amount of funds have been transferred, they'll then take the site down. So it's a very this is a really fast pace in terms of what these scammers are doing, which is why I think some of the longer term lists that get reported to some of the some of these larger entities, these bigger browsers, they're not necessarily going to contain the most fresh or the most frequent scams where folks are actually losing their money in real time. So.
Yeah. And last question before I let you go here. Is there any commercial threats or vulnerabilities that we've seen that we should be aware of? I know we talked about our MetaMask or using a hot wallet and the vulnerabilities there, approving a smart contract. Is there anything else that we might not know about as common day users on either the front end or the back end for these, these dexes, these marketplaces?
No, I mean, look, I'm a believer in decentralization and having folks, decentralized. So again, like, you know, once you feel comfortable going to self custody, I'm a huge fan of doing that and having tools to do that. I don't think we have sort of any. Let's put it this way: I don't want to make any sort of predictions on threats to the crypto space generally from a commercial perspective or specific companies, et cetera. What I would say is, you want to make sure that you understand where your assets are, who controls them. The not your keys, not your crypto is so true. Like if you need to have your own keys in self custody, and just really, again, figure out the best way to not just mitigate risk. So basically say, okay, I'm not going to get scammed at all. I'm going to take these precautions, but also really reduce your exposure through, again, some of the wallet strategies that you had alluded to. I think, most of the top wallets, I would say, seem to be quite secure. Some of them offer varying degrees of functionality and capabilities in terms of protection. But again, if you have your keys and you're the only person with your keys, that can go a really long way towards, ensuring your crypto assets are safe.
Yeah, definitely. I think the listeners should take note of everything that you just mentioned there. Making sure that you double check websites, making sure that you segment your assets through different hard wallets or cold storage and utilize different wallets is very, very important. I think TrustCheck is a must. I know that there's a lot of people trying to solve that problem where you're reading, they can't read. I've been to so many NFTs, but every time I read a contract, I don't know what it's talking about. So making it easy is just another layer of protection that I appreciate. And I'm going to look for a TrustCheck pop-up notification at every time now, and I'm going to trust you guys to do probably the hard work and to simulate what the contract actually says.
Yep. No, well, look, obviously we appreciate that, and I mean, just one word of caution too. Like, again, as we talked about, it's an arms race between scammers and anti-scam tech. So even if you are using one of these tools, by the way, TrustCheck's not the only one out there. There are other ones too. Like, we just want this tech to get out there as much as possible. Really, just make sure you understand where you are, the environment that you're in, and by environment, I mean, website you're on, what wallet you're using, what it's asking you to do. We can help with that. But again, just, really, anytime someone's doing FOMO, just watch out. It tends to be, it tends to be potentially nefarious. So, again, I don't like to say DYOR because because I think that's a phrase that a lot of folks in the industry, DYOR standing for do your own research. It's a phrase that a lot of folks fall back on as kind of like an excuse to not help with these security things, right? It's like, oh, just DYOR, and no, if you get scammed, too bad. But it is important, again, to, in addition to these tools, really just make sure that you understand what's going on, and that'll educate you and help keep you safer as you're interacting with Web3 over the course of the long term. So again, thanks so much for getting the word out there about this stuff. Can't say enough how important it is.
Yeah, no, last point about your just last comment there. And to your point, absolutely, I agree with you, because there are some transactions where they need access to your entire portfolio. And it says it on there, it's going to access all your NFTs. And then for one of the NFTs that I own, so this one's the artifact one by Nike, I had to go into the Discord and people are asking like, hey, it's asking to access my entire wallet and all my NFTs. And the administrator had to go out there and say, yes, we do need future access to this collection for basically there's different reasons that they needed it, right? So to your point, even though TrustCheck's going to say, hey, warning, it's going to access your entire catalog, one, you don't necessarily need to denounce that transaction, say, oh, that's a fraud, like I'm only trying to transact one NFT, which is a lot of times what these the bridges do. You exchange one NFT for maybe like a redemption of sort. But for this particular example, they needed it. They needed to connect your entire catalog, right? But where I feel safer with TrustCheck is because you have ran the backlinks. Like you maybe have some like spam traps or honeypots, and which ones are have been fraudulent in the most recent time. So definitely do your own research, absolutely. But I feel just a little bit safer knowing that you guys done some additional checks on top of what I traditionally do, which is a lot myself. I do way more than the average person in checking my NFT transactions.
Makes sense. No, that's great. And I think, yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joe, please.
No. I was saying, no, it's been amazing having you on. I'm going to put all the links down below. I would love to have you back in a year from now. It's going to evolve so much. And I know we're going to have so many more procedures to help protect the average person beyond just the web extension that you have. So I'm excited to talk security because I think we need more of it. I know big companies, when I talked to back in my old job, they just hated the process, right? But it's necessary. And there's no silver bullet, and it's only going to get more complicated. But that's what happens when you run your own bank.
Yep. No other way to put it. No, that's a great way to put it. Run your own bank. I love that. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Rick, so much. I appreciate you being on.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. It was a great time. Thanks.